it's producer Mark at KCMO Talk Radio, and if you're an NFL or college football fan, check out my weekly sports betting podcasts. Search College Pick'em Program or Sunday Sharps wherever you get your podcasts, and hit that subscribe button for my weekly picks, including the Chiefs, Mizzou, Kansas, and K-State. Now here's the Monday in the Morning podcast.
Well, the last two times the Chiefs lost to the Bills in the regular season, they ended up winning the Super Bowl. So I guess we should be okay with how things went yesterday, right? Good morning. Happy Monday. It's a rainy Monday across Kansas City, and we appreciate you being here and joining us on KCMO Talk Radio. So, of course, the Chiefs' perfect season is over. And I don't know about you, but I'm totally fine with that. I had no interest in spending the next 2 months talking about, are they going to go 17-0? No team's ever done that in the regular season. Of course, the Patriots did it, but they were 16-0. I was getting sick of that, and we really hadn't even started talking about it. But yesterday, the Chiefs lost to the Bills, and they deserved to lose to the Bills. And it's absolutely okay that they lost to the Buffalo Bills. I would much rather give this game up and then, of course, have to grind towards that number one seed, which is incredibly valuable in the NFL now. It used to be in the old NFL playoff rules, in case you're not a diehard sports fan, you'd have 6 teams in each conference get to the playoffs. The top 2 seeds would get a first-round bye. Now there are 7 teams in each conference who get to the playoffs, and only the number one seed gets that first-round bye. The Chiefs did not get that last year, of course. They still won the Super Bowl. So we get that nonsense conversation about going undefeated off of the team's back. They are dealing with a ton of injuries. The offense still has some work to do. And all this is okay because, as Patrick Mahomes said yesterday after the game, sometimes this can be the kind of game that sparks you.
Yeah, I mean, you can use it as fuel. I mean, like I said, it's a good football team, so nothing to hang your head on. I'm losing to them, but we feel like we can play better. So we'll get back to work and try to use this as a spark so that we can be a better football team in the end. And the undefeated thing was cool, but that's not our ultimate goal, so we'll keep building towards that.
The undefeated thing was cool, but it's not our ultimate goal. That's well said. And if this can spark them a little bit, so be it. I mean, let's just be honest about where things are at right now. They're a blocked field goal away from losing 2 in a row and sitting there at 8-2. Can we not forget that? There is work for this team going forward. We'll talk more about it, of course, with Kendall Gammon when he joins us next hour at 7:05 on KCMO. But there's still a lot that's got to be figured out. Now they're getting some bodies back, hopefully, here in the next couple of weeks. That will be good. Pacheco at the top of that list. But I'm just sitting here right now and saying, okay, fine. And I don't want to hear from Josh Allen after the game. Yeah, just another Week 11 win for us. Come on, Josh. I heard him say that. You guys acted like you won the freaking AFC Championship.
Circled it on the calendar, didn't they?
Come on. Just another win for us. Nothing more than that. Look at the way these guys were celebrating.
Yeah, the Bills fans hadn't seen them beat the Chiefs at their stadium since 2012. So.
Oh, that's right. The last 2 games were at Arrowhead in the regular season. Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Forgot about that. Was that both of them? And the last 2 years, I took my father-in-law and then my father to each of the Bills games. They lost both of them. So I don't know if they're the bad luck charm or me.
And I took Ray to the Bills game
last
year.
That's right. That's right, man. That's a tough one. But that's okay. How did each of those seasons end up? Raising a Super Bowl trophy. So, yeah, it was tough yesterday. I think Claire in my house was most upset by the loss, to be honest. She was, they lost. It's like, it's okay.
She doesn't know that in her lifetime.
Oh, she doesn't. She doesn't know that in her lifetime. But it's going to be okay. I'm not sweating it. I mean, I'm sweating certain things about the team, but I'm not sweating one loss right now.
I have just one question.
Yes, please ask it.
Why and how is it that they can put drives together like their you-know-whats are on fire and answer a score, but then go right back to sleep?
That is a great question.
That drives me nuts.
It is very much inconsistent. They'll have that 11-play, 88-yard drive that they had at the end of the first quarter, and then they go into 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. What happened
think
here?
They think too much. I mean, those drives where they're moving is like they're in rhythm. It's bang, bang, bang. And they've done that where they've scored 40 points in previous years against NFC teams on the road. And it's like, well, where is that?
Yeah.
Where does it go?
I'm with you, man. I'm totally with you, John. So, listen, bit of a downer on a Monday morning. Rainy Monday. You've got the Chiefs losing to the Buffalo Bills. The undefeated season is over. That being said, it was a fascinating weekend on the sports front. You had, and this will all tie back into politics as well, you had Friday night Netflix. You had the Paul boy, Logan Paul, going to fight Mike Tyson. And I didn't stay up. I didn't realize it was going to be on so late. But that thing apparently was buffering all night on Netflix. Apparently, it was just absolutely horrible,
Saw
John.
none of it.
Yeah, I heard the fight was terrible. Did you try to watch it?
I tried to turn it on. Got a little bit of, okay, the women are fighting. You know, it's like, oh, crike.
Yep.
You know, there's what? Undercard, I should have known.
Yes.
Right? And those kind of came in.
And then you got to the main event, and it was a mess.
I never saw any of it.
I saw people doing some memes after the
great
fight.
memes.
And it was like it was like if Netflix broadcasted last year's Super Bowl, and it's like Mahomes throwing it right as Hardman's about to catch it, it goes black, and it goes buffering, buffering, buffering.
And if you're not in Kansas City on Christmas, you're going to have to use Netflix to watch the Chiefs.
I know.
Oh.
Chiefs are on Netflix on Christmas Day. So Netflix had itself a bad night on Friday with this Mike Tyson-Logan Paul fight. And then Logan Paul realized he didn't want to kill 58-year-old Mike Tyson, so he let that thing go the distance. And then on Saturday night, you had Donald Trump show up at UFC 309 at Madison Square Garden in New York. And it's very rare that you see Donald Trump hug anybody, but he walks into the arena. It's like the White Knight. It's like a gladiator walking into the arena. Place is going nuts. They're playing his Kid Rock music. He sees his good buddy, Joe Rogan, and he gives him a massive bear hug. There's no point in me playing the audio because you've got to see it. But he gives Joe Rogan, podcaster who endorsed him late in the election season. Actually, I think it was on election day that Rogan came out with the endorsement. Trump gives him a massive hug. And they clearly talk about something for a couple of minutes, and then Trump sits there ringside for the entire event. And after John Jones wins UFC 309, what does he do? He gives his belt, his championship belt, to Trump. That's what he does. That's something you're not going to see this morning on Morning Joe. You're not going to see that one on CNN today. I promise you that much. He gives the belt to Trump. He does the Trump YMCA dance. And after the event, UFC CEO Dana White was asked about the election. And here is what Dana White had to say on what won this thing.
So I've had this philosophy for the last 5 years that traditional media is dead, and it doesn't hold the influence that it used to hold. The two most hated people in this world right now are the media and the politicians. Nobody trusts them, and nobody believes them. And the true influence right now is with these kids that are on the internet, and they're called influencers. So I've been creating relationships with these people over the last, like I said, 4 or 5 years. And this election was won on the internet. The Hispanic vote was incredibly powerful, the male black vote, and the youth. The youth all came out.
So that was Dana White's interpretation of what happened 2 weeks ago tomorrow. And yes, that's part of it, but when you're on the winning team, everyone will find the narrative for why their team won, right? I mean, it's not just the internet. It's not just some podcasters and influencers. Did they play a role? Did they help Trump? Absolutely. But there were a lot of people on the ground in Pennsylvania, obviously, who were hustling on behalf of this campaign. It was just stark policy differences. It was Kamala Harris being an awful campaign and having to deal with all the issues from Joe Biden's administration. It was Joe Biden being a colossally terrible president. It's not as simple as it being the internet, but obviously that is one thing that did make a difference for Donald Trump reaching young male voters. And that's why Donald Trump, in part, he likes showing up to these UFC events because he's well-liked at them. He is treated like royalty at them. Joe Rogan, Dana White, they're his guys. But those are also his people. the younger male voter that showed up on behalf of Donald Trump, who's going to go to a UFC fight on a Saturday night, is a Donald Trump voter. And Trump likes basking in the glory of their adulation. That's undeniable. And that's a large part of what you saw on Saturday night. And you know what? It's kind of that silent majority, that quiet male voter, whether it's a white male, a black male, a Hispanic male, who's been told for now going on years through DEI programs and media and everything else that you're nothing but a sexist and a misogynist, and there's nothing you can do about it except for atone to your sins. People stood up. This group in particular stood up and said enough's enough. And Donald Trump was there on Saturday night to kind of give him that big fist bump and saying, we got this. We're in this together. Now, one of the great things I saw over the weekend was some self-reflection on what's been going on in this country the last couple of weeks from somebody you would not expect. And we'll share that with you coming up at 6:15. Happy Monday. Great to be back with you. Pete Mundo on KCMO Talk Radio. So the big thing to watch early in the week is who Donald Trump is going to pick as Treasury Secretary. We'll be keeping an eye on that. That's one of the last major appointments, and of course these folks have to get confirmed, but it's one of the last major appointments that we are waiting to hear from Donald Trump on. And apparently he hasn't really settled on anybody just yet. I know Larry Kudlow, who was in the first Trump administration, turned down any government position, and I don't blame him one bit. Kudlow's a great guy, does a really good job on Fox Business, but said thanks, no thanks to a second go around. I got to check in with our buddy Steve Moore. He was with Trump in the first administration. He was on the show last Thursday, and he talked to us from Palm Beach, Florida. He wasn't at Mar-a-Lago, but he was heading to Mar-a-Lago right after we got off the phone with him. So I didn't get a text from Steve saying he's back in the administration, but I hope he's back, John. That'll be good for us.
His remark to you about when you asked him if you knew something, he threatened you.
Yes.
That suggested perhaps something was going on, I felt.
I agree. And he did text me after the show on Thursday. He said, fun, Pete, let's catch up every couple of weeks. Exciting times.
Yeah, I use the word threat tongue-in-cheek, of course.
Yes. He was like, if I tell you, I got to kill you. It was one of those deals. It was like a mafia threat. So I don't know.
Used to hearing that kind of stuff, huh?
He might be. He might be. But he's certainly a guy to keep an eye on as well. So we're waiting to see how Trump's economic team shapes up if our buddy Steve Moore gets on there in some capacity. And in the meantime, while Trump is just going to UFC fights, putting together the second Trump administration, you've got a lot of finger pointing going on the other side. You have some people who are willing to at least look in the mirror and say, geez, maybe we are the problem. And one of those folks over the weekend was Bill Maher. Bill Maher said something on his show over the weekend that I shared with you on this show a week and a half ago. And I'm not saying that to knock Bill Maher. I'm just kind of pointing out that we're about 10 days ahead of Bill Maher on some of these things. And it was some polling that came out in the last year that showed white progressives are far more to the left than Hispanic Americans and Black Americans are. When it comes to things like love for America, illegal immigration, building a wall, progressive whitey is way out in left field, and most people are not. But progressive whitey has determined the direction of the Democratic Party, and that's in part what hurt them in this election. Here is Bill Maher sharing some of these data points that I shared with you about a week and a half ago now, and I'm glad that Bill Maher, of all people, is coming around on this.
Democrats run for office as if the voters don't live here, as if they don't go to the grocery store and Starbucks and the office, but they do. They live here, and they actually see women and people of color, and it doesn't look like some patriarchal racist nightmare. Do problems remain pertaining to racism and sexism? Of course. But a poll last year asked, if America is the greatest country in the world, more blacks and Hispanic Americans agreed with that than the white progressives. It asked if racism is built into our society. White progressives agreed with that at higher levels than black and Hispanic people. It asked if government should increase border security. Same result. Hispanic Americans are less okay with illegal immigration than whitey. The votes are in. They don't want your pity. And black people can't afford to indulge rich white people's need to endlessly flagellate themselves. They just want prices to go down and good jobs and the police when you call them. Black people, they're just like us.
And you know who was clapping for him, who was on the show this weekend? Fredo Cuomo. Chris Cuomo, formerly of CNN, now of News Nation, was right there leading the charge, clapping away. Fredo with a big round of applause for Bill Maher on that line. And Bill Maher's right. Now, Bill Maher did not come to this conclusion a month ago when he should have. Bill Maher was predicting a Donald Trump blowout loss. But Bill Maher, unlike many of his colleagues in the media today, is at least able to look at what happened and come to a fairly obvious conclusion. And that is when you continue to struggle with the people that you have insisted you are working on behalf of, and the media has done your bidding on behalf of for multiple generations. For those working class, regular people like you and I, to oftentimes suddenly start shifting away from the Democratic Party and towards the Republican Party is, yes, in part a sign of how Donald Trump has remade the Republican Party, but just as much as anything, it's a sign of how the Democratic Party continues to blow off its toes one at a time. And it's because they are continuing down the road of appeasing the white progressive movement, the overeducated woke whites, the OWW crowd, which is what I branded them. I'm waiting for somebody at like Fox to steal that moniker, and they can. I would just ask for a little bit of credit. The OWW, the overeducated, not highly educated, overeducated, because they have more degrees than they need, woke whites. They now determine the direction of the party, and everybody has to get in line. But as Bill Maher said, they treat these people, they treat their own voters like they don't actually live in the country. They go to the grocery store, they see the cost of things. They go to a Starbucks, a Dunkin' Donuts, they see the cost of a coffee, right? And they also walk around the world and they don't get the sense of a patriarchal racist nightmare, as Bill Maher coined it right there. And he absolutely nailed that line as well. They don't see the world that white progressives do. And they also don't have the time or the money to have to appease the white progressives. I'm just not convinced. Bill Maher is one of a few. I'm not convinced that they're going to see the light of day on this stuff the way that Bill Maher is. He once in a while, more often than not, has an ability to see that, to see the forest through the trees. Can the rest of them? That remains to be seen. Coming up on KCMO, we will keep a close eye on something happening today in the Jackson County Legislature that you do not want to miss out on, plus a big retirement in the region we'll tell you about coming up on 95.7 FM KCMO and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. We got to watch this Jackson County Legislature today and see what they end up doing. It looks like the predictions are they are going to override Frank White's veto on a bill that the legislature passed last week. There was only one no vote on this bill to restrict gun ownership and purchases for anyone in Jackson County under the age of 21. That's the broad-based look on what the legislature passed last week. And the only no vote was our buddy Sean Smith, who just ran for Congress, who, of course, is on that Jackson County legislature. But you got a lot of people there who are trying to make a name for themselves, most notably Manny Abarca, who's never seen a television camera he doesn't like. He tried to push this thing. He did get this thing pushed through the legislature last week because, of course, this is how you combat gun violence in the wake of the Union Station shooting. We've got a ton of gangbangers under the age of 21 who possess illegal firearms right now and are not afraid to use it and shoot people with it. But now the ordinance put forth by Jackson County, that's going to scare them off. Even though most of these kids are already in violation of federal and state laws. This will be the thing that smacks them back into shape. Come on, spare me. But it's all about politics. Frank White vetoed this bill late last week. And he vetoed it because, as he noted, it was unlawful. Now, once in a while, that blind squirrel can find the nut, and that's what Frank White did in his press release. He said, despite recent amendments, this ordinance remains fundamentally flawed, unlawful, and counterproductive. Enacting it would mislead our residents, complicate law enforcement, and expose Jackson County to costly and unwinnable litigation. Manny Abarca responded and said Frank White is not the king of the county. The legislature will look to override his veto on Monday. That would be today. So I believe they will override that veto. And I don't want to hear from Manny Abarca or any of these people who claim that they're looking out for you when it comes to your property taxes and being good stewards of your tax dollars. Because you know and I know that if they override the veto, the Missouri Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, will go after them. And it will happen quickly. And there will be multiple lawsuits. And this county will then have to fight those lawsuits potentially. And that will cost you money. If you are a Jackson County taxpayer, and maybe you still haven't figured out your property tax debacle yet, is this how you want your dollars and cents being spent? Is this what you want your hard-earned money going towards? Your legislature passing clearly unlawful ordinances to claim they're fighting gun violence and combating gun violence, which you know and I know is complete and utter nonsense, right? I mean, they do this, and the big thing they're using is the shooting down at Union Station. That's the big thing that they're using to justify this. Well, one of the main shooters down at Union Station from the Super Bowl parade was 18 years old. And the other guy was 23. So you've got a 23-year-old who would not be impacted by this at all. The other one was 18 and clearly, allegedly, had no problem breaking the law as is. But don't worry, your little ordinance on the books is definitely going to be the thing that makes a difference. No doubt. Yep, that's going to be it right there. Please spare me. So I don't think it's going to be a surprise. It should not come as a surprise if your legislature passes this today. If you do want to call your Jackson County legislator and say you don't want this passed just because you don't want to waste the time and the energy it's going to take to fight this stuff in court, and also you don't want to be a pawn in the game of people who are trying to further their political careers. And that's what this is as well. It is people who are trying to further their political careers who know that this thing won't stand up in court. Even Quentin Lucas hasn't really talked about it because he knows it's not going to stand up in court. But I do guarantee, unfortunately, that it's going to happen today. Now, speaking of that big retirement that I mentioned before the break, Ann Selzer has announced her retirement from polling. Now, who you're like, gosh, what do I know? How do I know that name? I've been listening to the show. Why does that name ring a bell? Well, that name should ring a bell because Ann Selzer is the person who, about a week or so before the election, dropped a poll in Iowa that showed Kamala Harris beating Donald Trump by 3 points. And you heard from media all over the country about how, oh boy, no one knows what's coming. Ann Selzer's one of the greatest pollsters ever. Nobody knows the state of Iowa like Ann Selzer is what we were told. And what else did people do? They took that poll from Ann Selzer at the Des Moines Register and they combined it with this poll down in Kansas, done at Fort Hays State. And it showed Kamala only trailing Donald Trump by 5 points in Kansas, despite the fact that he won it by, 15 points last time around. They then looked at this Ann Selzer poll in Iowa, and they said, man, something's happening in the heartland. The heartland's coming around for Kamala. That should have been their catchphrase. Coming around for Kamala. And instead, what happened? Well, Trump won in Kansas by 16 points, a wider margin than he won 4 years ago. And he blew it out in Iowa, winning Iowa by over 13 points. Well, Ann Selzer is retiring from polling. And good riddance. She has announced that she is no longer going to be doing polling. And she apparently informed the Des Moines Register over a year ago. And her last poll is going to be Kamala Harris +3 over Donald Trump, which was only 16 points off. It's like the athlete that hangs around too long. Willie Mays falling over in center field with the New York Mets. I'm sure you can think of many examples for your preferred team as well, right? The guy who just hung around way too long. Well, that apparently is also true in polling, because this was one of the most embarrassing polls that was totally unbelievable to anybody who lived in this part of the country. I mean, many of you have friends and family up in Iowa. We have listeners up in Iowa. Our 710 AM signal, I know we're mostly now on 95.7 FM and streaming always on the KCMO Talk Radio app, but our 710 AM signal, in fact, is better in parts of Iowa sometimes than it is in parts of the Kansas City area, for crying out loud. That's why we had to go on the FM dial as well. But we had folks calling from Iowa saying, that was insane. This poll makes no sense. There's no way that she is going to be right. And it turned out she wasn't only not right, she was colossally wrong. And now her career as a pollster has come to an end. Now, of course, Donald Trump, being Donald Trump, has taken things to the next level. He heard this news, and he put out a post on Truth Social about Ann Selzer. He wrote here that she knew exactly what she was doing. Thank you to the great people of Iowa for giving me such a record-breaking vote, despite possible election fraud by Ann Selzer and the now discredited newspaper for which she works. An investigation is fully called for, he says. I don't know what Trump wants investigated. Two-bit huckster pollsters? I don't know what he's going for. Now, his insinuation there is that Ann Selzer, as he calls it, possible election fraud, was trying to potentially dissuade Republicans and give Democrats a little bit of boost, a little bit of energy going into Election Day in Iowa. And not just in Iowa, but around the country. Oh, my goodness, what if this poll is true? Well, here's the thing. Pollsters have been doing that since the beginning of time. If they have a slant, they can make a poll that makes their team feel good or makes their team feel bad. They can get whatever result they want from their polling. So this is not unique to Ann Selzer. And in the end, the person that takes the hit, the reputation that takes the hit, is Ann Selzer. Do I want her investigated? No. Do I want this investigated? Absolutely not. Because what Donald Trump should also take away from all this is that nobody listens to these people anyway. And that obviously is a great thing for him. One of the goofiest things I saw over the weekend was the reaction to Donald Trump walking into UFC 309 on Saturday night, Madison Square Garden. You know, he's got all his buddies there. Dana White walks out with him. It's Joe Rogan on the ringside calling the match. I mean, these are all individuals who obviously were largely behind him, endorsed him, and supported him. So Trump, as he's done many times, showed up to this UFC fight. But first time he's shown up at one of these fights as the president-elect, obviously, since he won less than 2 weeks ago. And the Garden went nuts. Remember, this is his hometown. It's still Deep Blue, New York. And this guy gets a hero's welcome walking out. I mean, it's like Mike Tyson in his heyday, walking out to the crowd going nuts. Not Mike Tyson on Friday night against Jake Paul at 58 years old and then kind of mumbling and bumbling around the ring for a few rounds. This was like heyday, primetime, Mike Tyson walking out, crowd goes nuts. That was Donald Trump on Saturday night. So you'd think the media would just let this go. Trump's in front of his people. You know, he's doing his Trump thing, waving to the crowd. Everyone loves him. You'd think they would just let this go. That would be the smart thing to do. If they wanted to, like, somewhat learn their lesson, they'd just be like, all right, Trump's at a UFC fight. He's been going to UFC fights for years. He actually is into the sport. If you listen to the Joe Rogan podcast with Donald Trump, they talk about UFC. Like, I think Trump probably knows more about UFC than he does the NFL. Just listening to him talk about the UFC, he's into it. He cares about it. But they couldn't help themselves. So I heard this ridiculous conversation yesterday that was on a CNN panel. And they're comparing Donald Trump at the UFC fight to like a Roman emperor walking in to the Colosseum. That was the analogy. Take a listen.
So what they are going to force those Republican senators to do is make a choice on those calls, and they will be doing so with the backing of the electorate. I don't think we can just say that they won't get through. I will believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I mean, and it really looks like ancient Rome here. This is sort of the conquering Republican Caesar who's going into the Colosseum, and everyone's cheering, and he's got his political gladiators with him. That appearance isn't just about him enjoying the applause. He's sending a message to the Senate.
For sure.
Like, not only are you entertained, but these are my people, and are you willing to fight? Because here's who I have.
And are any of us surprised by this? I feel like for anybody who has been covering Trump's campaign or his movement the past few years, these picks, sure, they're raising eyebrows, to say the least, but
a familiar character.
Yes, exactly. They've been with him at all these rallies. They've played a key role in where he's at now.
Yeah.
I can appreciate the commentator doing the "Are you not entertained?" from Gladiator, which I saw this new Gladiator 2 coming out. Looks like hot garbage. My gosh, I can't get away from these commercials I kept seeing during the Chiefs game yesterday. The girls were fascinated by it because there was so much violence in it. They kept asking about the darn commercial. I had to mute it every time I went to a commercial because I knew the Gladiator 2 commercial was going to come out. I'm like, where are the Moana 2 commercials when I need them? That's coming out too, but apparently they don't want to advertise to NFL fans. Just the Gladiator 2 folks want to advertise to NFL fans. I couldn't figure that one out. But as much as I appreciate the Gladiator analogy of "Are you not entertained?", they clearly have not learned their lesson. I don't think Donald Trump is walking into the Garden on Saturday night for UFC 309 thinking to himself that he is a modern-day Julius Caesar. I think he's a guy who's looking to see some friends who helped him win the election. And yes, I'm sure he loves the adulation of 20,000 people cheering him on, especially for the first time as a president-elect. It's one thing to be at Mar-a-Lago where you've got a couple hundred people, who are part of your inner circle giving you a round of applause. I saw he had a big event there Friday, or I guess it was Thursday night. There was a big event down there at Mar-a-Lago with the America First Policy Institute. And there were even some Kansas and Missouri folks there I saw on social media. But when you've got 20,000 regular folks, average Joes like us, who are going nuts for this guy, that's different than 200, 300 people at Mar-a-Lago for the, tuxedo events who are out there cheering your name. It's just a different feeling. And Trump clearly loves that feeling. And that's all it was about on Saturday night. But to tie it back to his appointments and being like, boy, this guy, he's just like the old dictators. Clearly, someone has not learned their lesson. And I'll add this as well. They're not interested in learning their lesson. Now, speaking of those who haven't learned their lesson over the last couple of weeks, let's get to our old friend, Jen Psaki. She is the person who used to be the White House press secretary before Karine Jean-Pierre took it over, the redhead, who's now doing her own show on MSNBC. And she spent her weekend talking about how Republicans overplayed their hand when it came to men competing in women's sports, and how this really isn't an issue, and Democrats shouldn't change their policy on this. They shouldn't back off of this. Instead, we should just point out that Republicans took advantage of this issue, but it really isn't a problem, so there's nothing to see here.
Now, these ads created this perception that the issues of trans kids playing sports was dominating schools across the country, which is completely false. Some people got pulled into that argument. I mean, immediately after the election, Congressman Seth Moulton told the New York Times that, quote, Democrats spend way too much time trying not to offend anyone rather than being brutally honest about the challenges many Americans face. I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete. But as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that. And then last weekend, Congressman Moulton came on this network to discuss those comments.
I was just speaking authentically as a dad about one of many issues where I think we're just out of touch with the majority of voters. And I stand by my position. Maybe I didn't get all the words exactly right. But the point is that the backlash I've received proves my point that we can't even have these discussions as a party.
Look, reflection is good. But if that were actually an issue at thousands of schools across the country, it would be worthy of a debate. But there are just incredibly few examples of transgender girls playing in youth sports. And when we see those examples, there isn't evidence that these kids are a threat to safety or fairness.
Okay, I guess you missed the recent one, the volleyball dude who's competing against women in the Mountain West Conference and is spiking balls off their faces. Like, that takes on a whole new meaning, by the way, spiking balls off their faces when you talk about boys competing in girls' sports. Sorry, I had to go there for a second. I find it awfully ironic. But Jen Psaki's justification of boys competing against girls in sports is, well, it doesn't really happen. That's like same thing with the border issue. Well, most illegal immigrants don't kill American citizens, so hey, it's just overblown. I mean, what's the big deal? It doesn't happen a ton. So stop. Give it up, John.
Trendiag was only at a couple apartment complexes.
Yes, same exact thing. The question is this. You can be respectful of people who are adults and for some reason decide they want to change their gender. I'm not here to stop them. I don't believe most Americans are. You can respect someone's decision as an adult, but then also say, on the other hand, when it comes to our sports, boys are not girls, girls are not boys. And if you're a biological man, you do not deserve to be competing against girls. And if you can't get yourself to come to that conclusion and that answer in the wake of 2 weeks ago, then you're totally missing what's going on here. And the name that they mentioned there, a guy named Seth Moulton, he is a congressman from Boston. Yesterday, there were hundreds of people rallying near his office in Salem, Massachusetts. It was the Neighbors Against Hate rally. This guy said the most sensible, normal thing, which is, I don't want my daughters competing against biological males. And now he's got hundreds of people outside of his office in Massachusetts for the Neighbors Against Hate rally. It's ironic to me, or I guess coincidental to me, that they're in Salem, Massachusetts. It's like they're there to burn the witch in Salem, who happens to be Seth Moulton, who is the guy who is actually speaking common sense to people who desperately need to hear it. But sure, it's us who have made a big old deal about this issue. I'm not buying it. And neither should you. And if this is the route that Jen Psaki wants to take, well, it's not that big a deal, so, we should just keep doing what we've been doing. Please do it. It will not bode well for you in future elections. You got a chance to wake up here. Do you want to wake up or not? So the greatest internet video that went viral right about at the end of the Chiefs game last night. So this brought great joy to me. It was a video that was first put out by Florida Congressman Byron Donalds. He is someone who is in President Trump's inner circle. And his team, I guess, put this together. And it since has racked up millions and millions of views in just the last 12 hours or so. And it opens up with a clip of Tim Walz. Oh, gosh, the books that'll be written about Tim Walz one day are going to be outstanding, aren't they? Just everything about this guy was so goofy. And the amazing part about Tim Walz is he got the VP job because he went on TV calling J.D. Vance weird. And he turned out to be the weirdest guy. I mean, talk about a plot twist. This guy turned out to be the weirdest cat out of all four of them. And he got the job by calling somebody else weird. It's amazing.
Sometimes projection happens.
And it's exactly what it was for old Timmy Tim. Tiananmen Tim. Some called him Tampon Tim. I always thought that was a little too crass. But, that'll go down in lore as well. The video opens up with Tim Walz talking about joy. And then it cuts to Donald Trump. And then it cuts to about a minute of NFL players, college football players, celebrities, John Jones at UFC 309 on Saturday night, soccer players, fraternity brothers, all over America doing Donald Trump's YMCA dance after scoring a touchdown or making a big play, getting a big sack. Have you seen this? You saw it a lot over the weekend. You saw Lions players. I saw Malcolm Rodriguez with the Detroit Lions. I saw Ridley with the Titans, former Alabama wide receiver. You had multiple. Nick Bosa's done it with the 49ers. And it's only getting more and more and more, it seems like, the last couple of weeks, where these NFL and college football players are all making a big play and then doing the Donald Trump dance to YMCA. Here's the video.
All the things that make me mad about those other guys and all the things they do wrong, the one thing that I will not forgive them for is their try to steal the joy from this country.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Trump's iconic dance moves are sweeping the internet and winning him a lot of fans across the globe. Trump's dance moves were on show throughout and even after his election campaign. And it seems like everyone wants to hop on the bandwagon.
Young man. Oh, man. So it goes on for another 40 seconds, and you've got all these football players dancing to Donald Trump's YMCA. Not Donald Trump's YMCA. I don't want anyone to think I'm giving him credit for the song. But it's a cultural flashpoint because you've had tens of millions of Americans who have been told for at least 4 years, but frankly longer than that you really can't support this guy. And if you do, we're going to call you names. You're a sexist, you're a misogynist, you're a fascist, you're a racist, you're whatever they want to call you on any given day. And Donald Trump didn't just win 2 weeks ago tomorrow. He won the popular vote. He won in an electoral college landslide, even though the states were close. He still won in a way Republican had not won in well over 30 years. George H.W. Bush. So all of a sudden these people are coming out. And while some of you might say, well, I thought you guys don't like politics in your sports. Yeah, I understand that. But doing a dance on behalf of a guy who happens to be the president-elect, to me is a little bit different than Colin Kaepernick taking a knee and comparing himself to a modern-day slave as he makes millions of dollars a year. I just feel like these two things are slightly different. As I say that very much tongue-in-cheek, they're very much different. Doing a YMCA dance to showcase your support for Donald Trump, maybe that's not even what you're doing, but it's interesting. You're seeing white players do it, black players do it. Malcolm Rodriguez, a Hispanic player, do it yesterday for the Detroit Lions after they blew out the Jacksonville Jaguars. I saw it was like, 52-6 or something crazy like that. It also really is not a good sign for the media narrative, which they have tried to pump up for the better part of several months now, which is that you can't possibly support this guy, especially if you're of a certain color. Well, NFL players are clearly showing that none of that matters. The white woke mentality is dead. And now you've got players of all backgrounds, of all colors, going out there and doing their YMCA dance. And that is really just a big double middle finger to not just media in general, but specifically sports media, which also has become so overly progressive and woke that please do say a prayer this morning for the sports media folks who are seeing this stuff play out on Sundays across the NFL and are realizing that, oh my goodness, you mean some of these players actually potentially voted for Donald Trump?
Talk about a bombshell.
It is going to be news to many of them because of the bubble that they have created for themselves. And I'm here for it. I really am. 913-408-7957. Another example of that will roll till 9 o'clock on KCMO. What's pretty crazy when you think about people like Donald Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., what do they all have in common? They are former Democrats. All four of them used to be proud members of the Democratic Party. We know about Donald Trump's history. Tulsi Gabbard was a congresswoman who was a Democrat. Elon Musk was right there side by side with President Obama for many years as he was becoming Elon Musk. And Robert F. Kennedy was obviously a longtime Democrat, as one of the most prominent Democratic families in the nation's history. Barack Obama almost named him the head of the EPA back in 2008. And now, look at all four of them. They have switched teams. And I can't help but think that examples like this in the New York Times are exactly why they have decided to switch teams, because in part, the disingenuous nature of their old team. The New York Times wrote here over the weekend the story about RFK. Of course, he's been appointed Health and Human Services Secretary by Donald Trump, still needs to get appointed. And the headline here was Kennedy's vow to take on big food could alienate his new GOP allies. Says processed foods are in the crosshairs of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but battling major companies could collide with President-elect Donald Trump's corporate-friendly goals. I want to share an excerpt from this piece that stood out among all the different paragraphs I read throughout the entire New York Times story. So listen to this. I know you're driving to the office, or maybe you're already getting ready. You're working from home, whatever. You got things going on. You got kids running around the house. But I'm going to share with you just a couple of sentences here that will clearly show how disingenuous this piece is from the New York Times. Quote, Mr. Kennedy has singled out Fruit Loops as an example of a product with too many artificial ingredients, questioning why the Canadian version has fewer than the U.S. version. But he was wrong. The ingredient list is roughly the same, although Canada has natural colorings made from blueberries and carrots, while the U.S. product contains red dye 40, yellow 5, and blue 1, along with BHT, a lab-made chemical that is used for freshness according to the ingredient label. So it's not wrong. It's literally not wrong. They write a sentence saying RFK is wrong, questioning why the Canadian version of Fruit Loops has fewer artificial ingredients than the U.S. version, and then not even two sentences later, the next sentence, they contradict themselves because it's not wrong.
I wondered where the fact checkers went.
Where did they go, John? I don't know. But they literally say RFK is wrong. Yeah, well, yeah, they're writing these articles. That's what they're doing.
They left Facebook. Right stuff.
Maybe
they're wrong, but they're right.
Maybe the Washington Post fact checkers can fact check the New York Times pieces. They can help each other out.
Try to, anyway.
And then the New York Times fact checkers can fact check the Washington Post. Maybe that's how they can work together in some way. This is insane. Like, I think I'm going crazy, and I will share this. I'll reshare it, repost it on X right now so you can see this for yourself. They say that RFK is wrong, questioning why the Canadian version of Fruit Loops has fewer artificial ingredients than the U.S. version. They literally write he was wrong, and then they list out how he was right. This is 1984-esque Orwellian insanity. He's not wrong. Speaking of RFK, the Wall Street Journal had this opinion piece by Alicia Finley over the weekend titled "The Democrats Made RFK Jr." The left revered him until the COVID pandemic made his aversion to vaccines much more pertinent. This is an outstanding piece that I'll just share part of here with you. Donald Trump likes to troll his opponents, she writes, and maybe that was his goal in nominating RFK to lead the Health and Human Services Department. Just as Democrats propelled Mr. Trump's White House comeback with their lawfare, they gave flight to Mr. Kennedy's Make America Healthy Again movement. They say here Mr. Kennedy gained political prominence in the 90s as an environmental lawyer and activist. Democrats cheered his crusades against coal plants, hog farmers, chemical producers, and other liberal villains, despite his well-known vaccine skepticism. Progressives were unperturbed by his unscientific methods. Only during the pandemic did Mr. Kennedy and the Democrats have a falling out. He then began to attract a large following among Americans fed up with the government shutdowns, mask and vaccine mandates, and efforts by the left to squash contrarian views. Health officials repeatedly dissembled about the scientific basis for their policies, which failed to control the virus and gravely damaged the economy and livelihoods. Americans sensed that officials were lying to get people to do what they wanted. The public did not like being manipulated. And that included here in Kansas City when you had the hypocrisy running rampant. You had Quentin Lucas down at the Ozarks having a great time, summer of COVID. You had Chubster Rex Archer, former KCMO health director, telling you not to hang out with your family on Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving. Boy, I love Thanksgiving.
We're right around the corner from Rexy's favorite holiday, Sexy Rexy, as we called him. Thank goodness he's retired. Yes, the public did not like being manipulated, writes the Wall Street Journal. Then came the vaccines. Officials overstated their benefits, played down their potential risks. People who claimed to have experienced adverse events were shunned. The CDC was late to warn of myocarditis as a side effect. U.S. public health authorities still have not acknowledged some rare side effects that European counterparts have, such as temporary facial paralysis and abnormal skin sensations. In the fall of 21, the government dumped the news that Americans would need to get booster shots. And if they weren't vaccinated, they would not be able to work. These moves fueled suspicions that the government was in league with Big Pharma. So then they go on the right here later in the piece. When it comes to RFK, there's also a kernel of truth in a lot of what Mr. Kennedy says about a lot of things. Take his assertion that the increase in mass shootings has nothing to do with the number of guns. That's true, but he wrongly blames antidepressants. He's correct that such drugs can cause suicidal thoughts and are overprescribed. But the real problem is rising levels of mental illness, which often goes undiagnosed and untreated in today's society. He's also right that Americans would be healthier if they ate less processed foods and exercised more, which are better ways to lose weight than taking drugs. But calorie-rich foods, not additives, are what's causing an increase in chronic illness and obesity. All-natural, non-GMO Häagen-Dazs won't make America healthy again. Mr. Kennedy is also right to criticize government climate subsidies and regulation as manifestations of crony capitalism. By invoking phony science to promote their political agenda and lambasting anyone who disagrees with them as a science denier, liberals have undermined actual science and created a vacuum of distrust. To many Americans, RFK Jr.'s ideas about vaccines sound less crazy than the left's supposed scientific claims say that there are 74 genders. Mr. Kennedy's appeal can be best summed up by Newton's third law of motion. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And that is exactly true. This piece by Alyssa Finley in the Wall Street Journal is just outstanding because I don't agree with RFK on a lot of things. I really love his Make America Healthy Again movement. If he can do some good work on these processed foods and the fact that Canada has healthier Fruit Loops than we do because of the additives that we allow in all of our food, that's going to be great. Will it make America healthier overnight? No. Is it a step in the right direction? Yes. Talking about it is outstanding. But the same people who will say that RFK is a nut job tell you that there are, as the article notes, 74 genders. So RFK, yeah, he may be nutty on some things. I think Trump's going to make sure he keeps him in his lane, so to speak. I think Trump felt he had to reward him for the endorsement. But Trump will keep a close eye on him. I do believe that. But I'm not going to listen to, as much as I think some of his ideas are bad, I'm not going to listen to the people who have been as whacked out, whether it's during COVID, on masks, vaccine mandates, or trying to convince me there's more than two genders, tell me somebody else is crazy. I'll come to that conclusion on my own. Thank you very much. 913-408-7957 on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. Let's fit in before we hit the break. Randy, what's up, buddy? How are you?
Hey, good morning. Hey, I was thinking back to Rush Limbaugh one day when he was talking about Obama, and he came in and he said, folks, I have to apologize. He said, I didn't realize it, but he said the minute I understood that he was doing these things on purpose, everything he was doing made sense. And I think that is a phenomenal thing to look at, that the people that are doing the things they're doing, just like with me, I buy some cattle from a guy, and literally they have taken the farmers' pharmaceuticals out of the feed stores. They have made it to where it's impossible to even care for your animals. And so if a person does that within the Department of Agriculture and stuff, you've got to understand that's not an accident. They're doing those things intentionally. And when somebody's harming you intentionally and you understand that, and at that point in time, that's why I say a lot of people need to back off and let Trump have a lot of slack in this because he's probably going after things that we have no clue what we're even looking at.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that, Randy. Thank you, my man. I appreciate it. And it is going to be a fascinating next couple of months to see how it all plays out. No doubt about it. Coming up on KCMO, we will have Will Scharf on just after 9 o'clock. He is a guy who ran for attorney general in Missouri. He lost in the primary to Andrew Bailey, but he just got a pretty big gig with the administration, the Trump administration. So we will talk to him just after 9 o'clock and what that is going to look like here on KCMO. Next, I want to give you the perfect example of economic stupidity that I could find from the last 24 hours. And I'll share it with you next on 95.7 FM KCMO. Oh, this is just so perfect, all right? When is 69 Highway supposed to be done? I think it's early next year it's supposed to be done. I mean, I was on it yesterday, and it's coming along. I think we're in the final stretch of that whole deal. But there will be, of course, tolls on the new 69 Highway that is being built for those who are going to want to skip some of the traffic that happens during rush hour. Now, you'll have a choice. If you want to pay money, you'll be able to take the toll lane. If you don't, you can sit with the plebes and sit in traffic. It really is mostly something that will be a convenience for those with more money, right? Those with more money will say, whatever, I'll pay the toll to go on 69 Highway and get to where I got to go faster. And those who maybe don't have as much money will say, well, I don't want to spend it right now, so I will sit in traffic. John, that's how it will work.
Well, being a native of the region, like if you live in Lewisburg, you just want to fly by all this crap until you get down there. So it might be worth your money then.
It might be. Mm-hmm. Depends what it costs, though.
You're heading to
right?
Well, that's always the thing.
That's the thing. Depends what it'll cost. Will it be $1?
The guy's stuck up there at the gate paying, it's not reading, and so people are slowed down, and people in the non-pay lane are going faster than you.
Yeah, that could happen as well. So it will be done officially by the end of 2026. The express lanes will open up towards the end of next year. So we're getting there. We're getting there. But anytime the government introduces toll roads, you got to be a little careful with how they pitch it to you. And here is a great example. So New York City, they love their toll roads and their toll bridges. That's how they fund the entire place. When I left there 7 years ago, it was $16 to cross a bridge or get into a tunnel. That number is going up during peak hours. They are now doing congestion pricing, which means on top of the already very expensive toll, you will pay another $9 to enter Midtown Manhattan during peak hours. That's obviously morning rush and afternoon rush. So back in June, they were going to institute a $15 congestion price. They paused that. And over the weekend, they announced that it was going to be instead a $9 congestion price during peak hours to get into Midtown Manhattan. So take a listen to the governor, Kathy Hochul, explain how this is a 40% reduction for you. Now remember, this is a brand new tax. This tax did not exist. They were going to make it $15. They now made it $9. And she's billing this as a way to tell you that your prices have come down $40 or 40%. That is not true. This is a brand new tax that they put in place, but this is Economics 101 to big government, bureaucrats, and liberals.
That congestion pricing simultaneously raise money for the MTA and drive down traffic congestion. These are important priorities. But I believe that no New Yorker should have to pay a penny more than absolutely necessary to achieve these goals. And $15 was too much. And I'm proud to announce we have found a path to fund the MTA, reduce congestion, and keep millions of dollars in the pockets of our commuters. Under this plan, the MTA will implement a congestion pricing plan with a reduced daytime toll of $9 beginning in January. You heard that correctly. It was $15 before, and now it is $9. That is a 40% reduction. This lower toll will save daily commuters nearly $1,500 annually. And that kind of money makes a big difference for our families.
How full of crap are these people? They think you are stupid. She thinks that taxing her citizens $9 for driving instead of $15 when it used to be $0 is saving them money. I mean, this is so insulting at every level, John.
The money goes a long way, though. Pete.
I know. The money goes such... This
no
is
sugar, Sherlock, right?
What a scam. This is how big government people screw you. They think you are stupid. It's the same thing here in Johnson County, or use Jackson, but it gets used a lot more in Johnson County in certain cities when they say, well, the mill levy's low. We're decreasing the mill levy to make sure your property taxes don't go up as much. Okay, my property taxes went up 20%. Stop telling me that, well, the mill levy went down. I don't care what the mill levy is. I don't pay a mill levy. I pay a property tax, which is based off the mill levy. But the mill levy coming down still means my property taxes go up, so I'm paying more money. Stop lying to me. Whether it's the governor of New York, whether it's some of your local mayors, whether it's your county chairman, your county commissioners, they all pull the same nonsense. They have this voodoo math that makes it look like they're doing you a favor, but they're not doing you a favor. And this case out of New York is quintessential. Great example of how the government will tax you and tax you and tax you and actually tell you that they're doing you a favor. And they're not.